the man that was doing the ultrasound looking over and saying, I'm not seeing any blood perfusion to this kidney. I just seen the panic on their faces that, they didn't know what was going on here. My surgeon and our colleague pushed me back themselves on the bed, straight back to the ward.
Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast in partnership with Kidney Care UK, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.
Hi and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. I'm your host, Dee Moore. This is part 2 of my conversation with Johanna. If you haven't already watched part 1, I'd really encourage you to go back and watch that first, as Johanna shares the early part of her kidney journey, including her childhood diagnosis, dialysis, and first transplant experiences. In this episode, Johanna opens up about transplant complications, loss, returning to dialysis, and receiving another kidney transplant from her brother. Here is part 2 of my conversation with Johanna. Before we begin, please remember that this podcast shares personal experiences and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult your healthcare team for guidance about your own health or treatment decisions. Today's episode contains discussions around medical complications. Please listen with care and be kind with yourself. So now, with the unfortunate failure of this kidney, you now faced having to return to dialysis. So how was dialysis for you after going through all of this?
It was horrific, quite honestly. I was 20 years old. I was not expecting it. And I was, sort of dialysing in a room full of elderly people. And I was about 40 years younger than all of them. And because I had came from children's services the last time I had dialysed, and I'm now in adult services dialysing, it was like night and day. It was very unprepared, basically, is kind of a real big thing. I was unprepared. But I had a boyfriend at the time. And of course, that relationship went by the wayside quite quickly after that because, he wanted to go travelling and do X, Y, Z, and I couldn't do that. So I, broke up with me. Friends sort of abandoned me because I wasn't able to go out and party and drink and go on holidays or things that they were doing. I couldn't do any of that stuff. So I was isolated. I had nobody. And I didn't have university. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. I was just dialysing. And I was so ashamed and so embarrassed of my situation. I was mortified. I just, I had a line at the time and then I had a fistula and I felt I just felt like an entity that was being kept alive. I saw no hope. I didn't know who the hell I was. I had no identity. I was a 20-year-old female who was very lost, and I eventually went over to another hospital to start dialysing. And I just remember being so angry all the time. I was just an angry, hated everybody around me, all the other patients, for no reason at all. Just that this is so unfair that I'm here. You've all had a chance to start your life and have your families and have your husbands, and I've got nothing. I'm just so resentful of everybody. And in the hospital, which I still go to, and they're amazing, they used to try and sort of get me involved in setting up the machine, and I would be like, no, I don't want anything to do with that machine. Please, I can't even look at it. I don't want anything to do with it. So I just felt like my body was a vessel to be used to stay alive through artificial means. I didn't really, in hindsight now, I know that I was probably quite mentally unwell. And I was, like I touched on, I was really angry. And of course, who did the anger come out at? But it was my mum, who was the closest person to me. And I was just, I'd be hysterical sometimes for no reason. And I was so damaged by it. I was so damaged, and I felt so ugly and so unattractive because of the fistula, and had to get multiple procedures on the fistula because it was so swollen and huge, and having the line in. And I just thought, who is going to ever want to be with me, or, you know, anything? Where am I going in life? I'm going nowhere. I just shut myself away and just tried to keep my head down and got on with it as best as I could. But I didn't think I'd survive it, quite honestly. I really didn't think I would survive it. So yeah, but I have, obviously.
What you've described is trauma. It's such a difficult thing to go through as at such a young age. And for the family members of kidney patients who are showing behavior like this, they might not understand the anger or understand the different emotions that their loved one is going through. So for those family members who may be watching or listening today, talk to them, show them like the kind of things that you described, and why it's important to give their family member that bit of grace, even though they might not understand why they're showing this.
So I think it's, you're always sort of, I think, trying to prove yourself when you're on dialysis, but often, you know, people might feel like they're in a hopeless situation, that they're trapped and they can't get out of it. And I guess in some ways they are trapped. And you can only really say to someone, imagine you were trapped and restricted in your own life, and you were in this sort of cage, invisible cage. Of course you'd be screaming, screaming to get out and screaming to be helped, but it doesn't always manifest itself in the most productive way. Um, and what, it's good for the family members to remember that despite the person being on dialysis, the person on dialysis still has needs and wants and dreams like everyone else. They're also, and I think what we don't speak about a lot is that they're a sexual being. And sexuality, when you're on dialysis, is a bit of a taboo subject because you've got all these additions to your body that you did not ask for. And that can have so many different feelings of, I'm so unattractive, who would want to, have sex with me? I'm not desirable to anybody. And it's just, there's so many different facets of this that can cause a person to become so distressed and so overwhelmed that there are going to be times where it's going to come out as anger and upset, and it might look hysterical, but it's somebody just screaming for help, and there's no help. Unfortunately, there's no way out of this situation at all. It's completely at points hopeless, and that can be terrifying for people.
So for someone who's listening or watching who's going through this, who has those feelings of hopelessness or has those feelings of feeling trapped, what advice do you have for them?
So, from my own experience, of course, I never used to speak about it to anybody because I was so ashamed and embarrassed and I wouldn't say anything. But now, for me, that I'm back on dialysis and have some of those similar feelings again, although not as massive as they were before, reaching out to a kidney community of like-minded people, listening to things like your podcasts where you're going to hear people speaking about things that you may be able to relate to, or, going on different forums or different, obviously we've got social media now, which wasn't a huge thing back then. Go and seek out people and speak to people in a similar position, because then you might understand that you're not alone, and you might find that they're coping in a better or a different way. You could learn from them, because I was very close-minded to that before. I never wanted to speak to anybody on dialysis, or I thought, no way, there's nothing I could learn from them. I don't want to speak to them. But I've done that this time around, and it's done me so much good. It's really opened my eyes to, oh wow, there is other people out there like me and who feel similar to me. This is quite something.
And this really shows the power of the kidney community, supporting each other, sharing our stories, because it really does make you feel less alone, knowing that someone's been through what you've been through and has come through on the other side, and they're okay, and gives you that hope that you're going to be okay too. So thank you for sharing that. So you went on to have another kidney transplant. So how did that come about?
So that was, I had spent around about 4 years at that point on dialysis. Never once had had a call off the transplant list. So by this point, I was quite highly sensitized. I think I had, excuse me, about 95% antibody level. So would have rejected about 95% of all kidney types. But my brother, who was younger than me at the time, he was only about 21 or 22, and at university, it got to the point where he decided that he wanted to be tested to see if he was a match, which quite honestly I didn't think he would be, given how, the antibody levels. I thought, okay, sure, go for it. It'll probably not. But of course, my brother was a match, and not only was he a match, he was almost a perfect match. Like miraculous was kind of what they said about it. So my brother went through all the testing and everything was good. He was a healthy young man, thankfully. Um, and that surgery went ahead on the 28th of December 2012. So obviously that Christmas was quite special because we were running up to getting this transplant. But I was quite apprehensive, thinking, what if the same thing happens again? And all of this kind of stuff. Um, and before we went to theatre for the surgery, I had said to my mum, look, if this kidney doesn't work, I'm not going back on dialysis. I can't do it anymore. Especially if that kidney was to fail. I couldn't take another blow like that. Of course, my mum's like, just we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that another time. So went, got the surgery. It was really emotional day because it's my wee brother, my baby brother, and he's given me a kidney, and it was, for my mum, it was a lot. My dad, it was a lot. So went down, and I remember waking up from that surgery, and again, it's quite emotional. The first thing my mum said to me was, "Wow, your eyes are so clear. Look at your eyes, they're so clear. Like, just look so healthy." And that was huge for me because that was like, this kidney's working. It's working, and it was working amazingly, and it was producing loads of urine, and they were really, really vigilant with me that second time, because obviously they didn't want what happened the last time to happen again. Um, so yeah, I got this kidney, and it was an absolutely fantastic kidney. It worked straight away. It was doing everything it should have done straight away. I had a really quick recovery, and I felt like the whole entire world had just opened up. It was like I'd been in the dark, sorry, been in the dark for such a long time, and the whole entire world just lit up for me after that. Um, yeah, it was amazing.
It's so wonderful to hear that you got that confirmation straight away, seeing the difference in your eyes and knowing that that kidney was working. So, how did your life change now that you got that successful transplant?
I mean, I wouldn't even say, I wouldn't even use the word changed. It saved my life. Like, it saved me as a person. I think straight away, almost like within 2 weeks of coming home from hospital, I was already, right, that's it. I need to run with this and get on with my life now. So it's been stopped for so many years. So I applied for college at the time, and then went to college about 5 months later to get the qualifications I needed to go to university. Um, I was able to meet new friends, socialise, go out, date, all the usual stuff. I went and moved out of the house, got a flat, living independently and loving my life. Went to college. Like I say, got my qualifications. Eventually got accepted to university to do nursing. And then met somebody around that time, and I got pregnant. I got pregnant about 1.5 years after a transplant, which I think I'd done about 25 pregnancy tests because I could not believe that somebody like me could get pregnant. I was like, what? Me? Me pregnant? No, surely not. So left university and had my daughter, and I raised her whilst doing me kind of part-time jobs and voluntary things. Raised her on my own for the majority. That relationship didn't work, which is fine. And then I went back to university in 2020 and done my degree and got my nursing degree, mental health nursing degree. And then I met my now husband in that time as well. I just went with life. I just ran full throttle at life. I was out, I was meeting new people and making experiences, and because I think there was always in the back of my mind, I knew that this transplant could fail again and I could be back to square one. And I thought, I'm just going to go with this and live my best life, going on holidays and just being free, essentially just having the freedom. But being a mother was hugely significant in all of that. Being able to raise my child and having a healthy child meant a lot because obviously I was not a healthy child. Um, and I just felt so privileged and so happy and proud of myself, and the way I saw myself changed so massively as well. I was like, I'm actually a really great person and I'm a really capable person and I'm actually attractive to people, and there was so many things. It was like colours and rainbows, whereas before it was just darkness and bleakness. It was just amazing having that kidney. It was such a great kidney, and it done so many things for me.
It's wonderful to hear what a difference this transplant made for you, and to have the blessing of being able to have your daughter as well is a wonderful outcome and shows just how amazing kidney transplantation is. But sadly, I know that this kidney went on to start to fail, which is a stark reminder that kidney transplantation is a treatment and not a cure. Tell me about what happened next.
Yeah. So I had 12 amazing years with that transplant. And then I was in my third year at university, and usual, you go for your blood tests every 4 weeks to the renal clinic. And they phoned me up one day when I was in work on placement, and they said, your creatinine's away up at 500. But we'll really need to kind of get you back in and get bloods. And of course, in that moment, I knew, I knew that was it. I just felt like the whole world was falling in on me. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So yeah, went for more blood tests. The creatinine was still rising. So they done a renal biopsy again, as they always do. And they saw that there was some rejection in the kidney, as well as there was kind of evidence of FSGS as well, which had always been in all my native kidney and my transplants. So I was like, okay, this is going to be a slow decline, and this is something I'm going to need to face again, this whole battle all over again. And by this point, I had met my now husband. He was my boyfriend at the time, and I had said to him, look, you have no idea what you're about to get involved with. You need to leave this relationship now. I won't hold it against you, because I couldn't possibly see myself as being lovable and wanted whilst on dialysis, because those two things for me did not correlate. So I gave him so many options to leave, and go, I was like, you have no idea what you're about to be in for. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that. So stop. And of course, they tried to treat it and things with high dose intravenous steroids and all of this. And it sort of staved it off for maybe less than a year, maybe a year or so. But the function did keep declining. And I was still, I qualified and I got my job and I was still working full time whilst I was in stage 4 CKD. And every week I was going back to the clinic and they were telling me creatinine's going up and up and up and up. And then, of course, conversations started to happen about dialysis again, which when I had my transplants, I did not want to hear, see, or think about dialysis. I didn't want to know about it. I wanted to always separate myself from anything to do with renal. So having to go back and face that head on again was, I couldn't breathe. Like I just felt like I couldn't breathe. It was like there was no escape. So that kidney, I ended up actually, I got the flu at the end of 2024. And the flu was what sort of was the final nail in the coffin for this kidney. And I think I ended up on dialysis about 2 months later because my function declined so rapidly after I was really quite unwell with that flu, despite having had my flu jag as well. And I ended up on dialysis. And again, I kept saying to my husband now, you need to go. Like you cannot, this is hell. This is hellish. And he did that. I think back when the kidney started first failing is when he first told me he loved me, because it was a case of like, I love you. Like, do you not get it? I love you. It was almost, I felt like I couldn't possibly be loved and be on dialysis. Those two things didn't really go together. So I ended up back on hemodialysis in January 2025. And I fought it and I fought it and I fought it for long. So, I was still working full time until 3 days before I went on dialysis because I was so determined to just keep going, almost trying to ignore it, even though I was getting all the symptoms and I was being sick and my ankles were all puffy and things. But I was like, no, I'll keep going until I was defeated and ended up back on dialysis again.
In terms of what you were now going through in starting dialysis again, what was the turning point? How did things then begin to change for you in terms of your mindset?
I think because my situation was so different than it was the last time, that it wasn't just me. I had now built this life that I really strived and struggled really hard to build. But I tried to build it because I knew that I might end up back on dialysis, so that when I did potentially end up back on dialysis, that I would have something to show for it. So my mindset was changed because I was a mum, that I had this husband who, well, my partner at the time, who seemed to love me unconditionally and give me so much support. I had a group of friends, have a group of friends that are so supportive and wonderful. And I thought, I have a reason to live. I have a reason to keep going. And also I have a career, which I didn't have before either. And I was determined that I wanted to get back to work as soon as possible, and try and not let dialysis consume every single part of my life and not let it defeat me and destroy me the way that it did before. And I had to, I guess, my daughter, and you know yourself as a mother, you are driven on by your children. I mean, what better way to show your female child resilience than to face your challenges head on, but still try and function well around that situation. And I'm also older as well. And, I'm 39 now, and that's vastly different from being a 20-year-old. And I know who I am, and I'm very comfortable with who I am. And yeah, I don't. There are times I do still have identity crisis on dialysis, and because I feel like it can become all of your kind of personality, and people always ask you about it, and you don't always want to talk about it. You want to talk about other things, but I just feel that I can live on dialysis as opposed to just exist and be kept alive on it. I'm sort of working it around my life as opposed to it working my life. You know, it's sort of I'm fitting my life into dialysis, and dialysis is there, but it's something I need to do, but it's not everything.
I'm really glad to hear about that change in your mindset, and the difference that it makes is so powerful, and really goes to show that even when your situation doesn't change, your mindset towards it can make a massive difference in how you navigate it and how you feel about it. And really goes to show that it really is possible to thrive on dialysis. So, with everything that you've learned and everything that you've been through, the highs and the lows of your journey, what is the message that you would like to share with the listeners and the people watching the podcast?
I think that, you know, it's always going to be that chronic kidney disease, especially when dialysis, transplants are involved, it's never going to be an easy road. It's always going to be a difficult, challenging, traumatic, awful road. However, it's how you choose to walk that road, I think, counts. And I think the support that you have is so, so important for people to have good support and someone in their life at least that they can speak to and who will support them through their highs and their lows, because there will be highs and there will be crushing lows. And I think as well, it's not easy to just get on with your life when you're on dialysis. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of thought processes, and it nothing's easy, but you've got to either sink or swim in this situation. And if you choose to swim, you might find that you can cope a lot better than what you actually initially thought. Make plans, make the small plans. It doesn't have to be grandiose and massive. Just, I'm going to a lovely restaurant this weekend. I'm really excited about it. Or I'm going to watch a play. I'm really excited about it. You don't have to go and travel the world. You don't have to go on big extravagant holidays. Just make plans, look forward to things, because otherwise you're just doing relentless treatment. Because as we know, there's no escape from this illness. No escape. Even with a transplant, you're always waiting and waiting and waiting for perhaps the transplant to fail. So just be confident in yourself, confident in your body. If you've got a line, if you've got a fistula, remember that those are, start looking at them as works of art, is what I start to do. Go, this fistula, it's a work of art. Wow, look at it, it's incredible. And start to change the way you see these things in your body that perhaps once caused you complete distress and made you feel like you were so unattractive and ugly. Um, but yeah, it's not an easy process. I'm not saying to anybody it's easy to do it, but and it does take a lot of work to be able to get to that point, but it can be done.
So I know that you're active on social media. What are your handles for anyone who wants to follow you?
Sure. So I'm most active on Instagram, and my handle is at Mrs. Johanna Bridges. And on my page, I really just talk about my own experiences of dialysis, things that I'm doing related to renal, just life updates and how I'm getting on. Yeah, just so people can see if they want to what it's like for somebody living on dialysis, or if perhaps there's people out there that feel a bit alone, or they would like to view other people who are living a similar life, then yeah, definitely you're more than welcome to follow my page.
And as always, I will put the links to Johanna's social media in the description box. So please do give Johanna a follow. Today, Johanna, you've shared your kidney worry story. You've shared about being diagnosed at a young age. You've shared about going on to dialysis and then kidney transplantation and back to being on dialysis. You've shared about the struggles, the highs and the lows. what is your final word of encouragement for the people watching and the people listening?
I think the message I want to get across is that really just try and live your life to the fullest of your capabilities whilst on dialysis. Don't let it just become every single part of your personality, of who you are. You're so much more than just a piece of machinery that's an artificial kidney. Make plans, try and look to the future. It can feel hopeless. I'm not going to lie. You feel hopeless, and especially if you're in a position where it's difficult to get transplanted, you feel that time might never come. But you can't just sit and wait for that transplant to come. You need to grab life where you can and take joy in the little moments, and just, yeah, keep yourself as well as you possibly can, and just look to a future that you could potentially have. It's not the end yet.
Thank you so much for that powerful word of encouragement. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that you're going to help so many people out there with what you've shared today. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. And a huge thank you to Johanna for sharing her story so openly and honestly. Stories like Johanna's are such an important reminder of the lifelong realities of chronic kidney disease, dialysis, and transplantation. If this episode resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share it to help raise awareness of kidney disease. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss an episode of Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. Until next time, take care and choose to live.
Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast in partnership with Kidney Care UK, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.